There are moments in life that feel like a line in the sand, a point of no return. For me, that moment wasn't at a courthouse or in a whispered fight, but in the sterile silence of our private jet, somewhere above the clouds. He looked at me, my husband, Alex, his eyes glittering with a mixture of fear and rage, and he said, his voice a low, chilling whisper, "Claire, you will sign that agreement. If you don't, consider yourself cut off. Everything. The house, the cards, the life you've come to know. It all disappears." He thought he had me cornered. He thought he held all the power. But what he didn't know was that while he was busy building his empire in the sky, I was quietly discovering the truth of the ground he stood on, and 3 weeks later, I became his landlord, holding the keys to his entire world. We met at a charity gala, the kind of event where champagne flows freely and conversations are measured in social capital. I was there with my parents, doing the rounds, feeling a little out of place in my simple silk dress. Alex was the star of the night, a tech prodigy who had built his company Apex Innovations, from a dorm room to a global powerhouse. He had a way about him, a magnetism that drew you in, and he was undeniably charming. We danced, we laughed, and by the end of the night, he had my number. Our courtship was a fairy tale. He flew me to Paris for a weekend, surprised me with an impromptu trip to the Maldives, and filled my life with a kind of effortless luxury I had only ever read about. I was an amateur historian, passionate about preserving forgotten stories and places. He found it endearing, a charming little hobby. "My little history buff," he'd call me, a fond but patronizing smile on his face. I didn't see the condescension then. I was too wrapped up in the whirlwind. We were married a year later, a lavish, extravagant wedding that felt more like a movie premiere than a personal celebration. His parents, wealthy but unpretentious, adored me, but his business associates, the sleek, money-obsessed people he surrounded himself with, saw me as another one of his beautiful possessions. Alex took over all our finances with a casual, "Don't worry your pretty little head about it, Claire. I've got it all handled." And I believed him, trusting the man I thought I knew completely. The first hint that our perfect world was a fragile illusion came at a seemingly harmless family dinner. Alex's cousin, a jovial man named Ben who worked in the legal department of Alex's company, pulled me aside. His face was pale, his hands shaking slightly as he handed me a glass of water. "Claire, I have to warn you," he whispered, his eyes darting to make sure no one was listening. "The lawsuit. It's bad." He was talking about the legal battle between Apex Innovations and Alex's former business partner, a man named Julian. Julian was known for his ruthlessness, a brilliant but vindictive man who claimed Alex had stolen his intellectual property. "Julian has something on Alex, something big. The company is on a knife's edge." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The lawsuit had been a constant source of stress, but Alex had always dismissed it, calling it a minor inconvenience. "Don't believe the rumors," he'd say with a dismissive wave of his hand. But seeing Ben's genuine fear, I knew it was more than a rumor. The next day, Alex came home, his face like a mask of cold fury. He didn't say a word to me. He went straight to his study, slamming the door. The lavish lifestyle had a hidden cost, and it was becoming clear that it was more than just money. The following weeks were a slow descent into a new reality. The luxurious dinners were replaced with tense silence. The spontaneous trips became a source of stress, a way for him to avoid his problems at home. He began to question me about my whereabouts, my conversations. "Who were you talking to on the phone, Claire?" he would ask, his voice sharp with suspicion. One night, he came into the living room, a stack of papers in his hand. "Claire, I need you to sign this." It was a new post-nuptial agreement. My stomach dropped. The terms were shocking. It gave him full financial control of every asset, every bank account, every piece of property we owned. It even included a clause about my personal inheritance, a small sum from my grandmother, which he had always said was mine. Now it was listed as a marital asset, with a stipulation that I would lose it all in a divorce. "This is a precaution," he said, his voice unyielding. "Julian is a snake. He'll try to leverage anything he can, even you." This protects us. The word us felt hollow. It was all about him. I hesitated. Alex, I don't understand. This is so one-sided. His face hardened. You trust me, don't you? Just sign it. It's for our future. Couldn't sign it. Not yet. I told him I needed time to think. He stormed out of the room, leaving the papers on the coffee table like a silent ultimatum. I didn't sign the papers. I didn't say a word about them. I just started digging quietly. I had a unique skill set, one he had always dismissed. As a historian, I knew how to research, how to find the hidden truths buried in dusty archives and long-forgotten documents. I started with the most powerful piece of his empire, the building that housed Apex Innovations. It was a beautiful, historic brick building in the heart of the city's financial district. I remembered him talking about how lucky he was to have found it. I began researching its history, from its construction in the late 1800s to its various owners. I spent hours at the city archives, poring over old deeds and charters. Most people would look for financial records or ownership history, but I looked for something else. I looked for the story of the land itself. I was searching for the why, not just the who. And then I found it. Buried deep within a city charter from 1892, a single, unassuming paragraph. The land where the Apex Innovations headquarters stood was not just sold, it was bequeathed to a small historical preservation trust with an ironclad perpetual clause. The land could only be used for non-commercial purposes unless the trust gave its unanimous consent. It was a legal relic, a ghost of a bygone era. Loophole. A beautiful, explosive loophole. My heart pounded in my chest. I had found his Achilles heel. A weapon he had no idea I possessed. I couldn't just tell him. I knew he would use it, warp it, and turn it against me. The only way to win was to play my hand in secret. The trust, I discovered, was a phantom. It hadn't been active in decades. Its members were a handful of obscure academics and local historians. One of them, Dr. Alastair Finch, was a kind, brilliant man I had met at a historical conference years ago. We had kept in touch, exchanging emails about historical preservation. I reached out to him, not as Alex's wife, but as Claire, the historian. I explained what I had found. His voice on the phone was a mixture of disbelief and excitement. My God, Claire, this is incredible. That charter, it's legendary. No one thought it was real. We've been trying to find a way to reactivate the trust for years. The records are so scattered. I told him I could help. My research skills, the very thing Alex had called a hobby, were about to bring his empire to its knees. I worked tirelessly, using my own discreet networks, to track down the other trust members, a quiet band of academics and archivists. One by one I won them over, showing them the documents, the history, the forgotten truth of the land. The tension at home grew to a fever pitch. Alex was a different man, a shell of the person I had married. He was consumed by the lawsuit. Julian's lawyers were relentless, and the legal fees were bleeding the company dry. I don't know what else to do, Claire, he said one night, his voice thin with panic. They're trying to bury me in legal motions. They want to dissolve the company. I looked at him, and for the first time in months, I felt no fear. Only a calm, surgical resolve. I had a plan. A silent, perfectly executed plan. The final court hearing was set. Alex was confident. He had Julian backed into a corner, or so he thought. He had even managed to get his parents, my in-laws, to come to court to show a united front. As we sat in the courtroom, he leaned over and whispered, "Just be quiet, Claire. You have no idea what's happening here." My in-laws, with their kind faces, offered me a reassuring smile. Little did they know, their son's downfall was already in motion. The hearing began. Julian's lawyer presented their final arguments. Alex's lawyer, a slick, arrogant man, countered with a motion to dismiss. He was so sure of himself. And then my lawyer, the one I had hired in secret, stood up. The judge, a stoic woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, looked at her. "Do you have a motion, counselor?" My lawyer, a brilliant, unassuming woman I had met through Dr. Finch, spoke clearly. Your Honor, on behalf of the Riverview Historical Preservation Trust, we move to demand the immediate cessation of all business operations on the property currently occupied by Apex Innovations, due to a violation of a binding perpetual land use charter from 1892. The room went silent. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Alex's face went white. He looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and confusion. Julian's lawyer, a shark, was now watching with a triumphant smirk. This is a ridiculous claim, Alex's lawyer sputtered, trying to regain control. Your Honor, that charter is a legal myth. It's been dormant for over 100 years. My lawyer, calm and composed, presented the documents. The original charter, signed and sealed. The recent unanimous vote by the Trust's members. She even presented a detailed historical timeline, painstakingly put together by me and Dr. Finch. Alex looked at me, a silent, desperate question in his eyes. He was seeing me for the first time, not as his wife, but as a person with a plan, with a will, with a quiet, terrible power he had never anticipated. My little hobby had just brought his entire world to a halt. The judge called a recess. Alex grabbed my arm, his grip hard, painful. Claire, what is this? What have you done? I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, my voice steady. You wanted me to sign. You wanted to cut me off. You wanted to own me. You don't get to do that, Alex. Not anymore. I'm not a trophy wife. I'm a historian. And I found a very inconvenient piece of history you missed. He stared at me, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. My lawyer then stepped in, pulling me away. We have an offer, she said to Alex's lawyer. My client Claire, as a key member of the trust, will grant Apex Innovations a new legal lease on the property, and she will personally sign a motion to keep the trust from pursuing further action. In exchange, your client will sign a new post-nuptial agreement, one that is fully equitable and gives Claire full financial autonomy. And he will make a very large public donation to the trust, one that will fund historical preservation in this city for the next 50 years. His lawyer looked at him, a silent question in his eyes. Alex, defeated and desperate, nodded. He was a prisoner in his own kingdom. The man who had threatened to cut me off financially now owed his entire existence to me. The irony was so poetic, so beautiful, it took my breath away. He had built his empire on a foundation of sand, and I, the humble historian, had found the stone to destroy it or save it on my own terms. The final meeting was at our lawyer's office, not a courtroom. He was quiet, his eyes hollow. He signed the new agreement and I signed the new lease. He had his company back, but it wasn't really his anymore. It was mine in a way that mattered. Silent, perfect victory. He never understood. He never will. I'm a different woman now. A woman who doesn't need a man's money or approval to feel safe. I am the woman who saved him, and in doing so, saved myself. And if it were you, what would you have done in my place?